Thanks. So again, as Matt said, we're all about enhancing building energy resiliency, decarbonization, and affordability. What it's called the energy trilemma, as you probably have heard this term. So, I mean, you're probably aware of the world's energy megatrends: renewable energy penetration, electrification, and EVs, which is a part of the electrification, but I put it aside because, it happens much faster and in a much larger scale. All the three megatrends already causing huge electricity demand increase anywhere between 200 to 500% within the next 2 decades. Severe energy resiliency issues. I mean, once you put more renewable, and if you add the global warming and so forth, you can see a huge amount of outages and resiliency issues, which is going to be more severe in the future, of course. And it requires trillions of dollars to upgrade the grid. One survey, by the way, just made a survey or a research. How much would it cost to change UK from boilers to heat pumps? And the investment in the infrastructure is 1 trillion euros just for one country. So it's a huge amount of money to upgrade the network. As for buildings, this is what we're doing. Most buildings waste a huge amount of energy, have high CO2 NOx emissions, if you're talking about boilers and so forth, are prone to power outages. I mean, 99% of the buildings rely on the public grid. There are only 5,000 CHP projects in the US, of which 150 are commercial buildings out of like 6 million. So it's 99.99%. And limited electrical capacity, since it's very hard and difficult to upgrade the building electrical network. If you want now to upgrade your building to cope with the additional of EVs and heat pumps, in most cases, the utility would say no. I mean, there's no capacity. Just to give an example, a high voltage line would take about 14 years, anywhere between 10 to 20 years to put in place, and you need a huge amount of high voltage lines. So it takes decades to electrify everything. So that's why people think that in 250, you can electrify 50% of the energy, and 50% will still be relying on either renewable natural gas or green hydrogen or both. So this is the amount of commercial buildings in the US. This is 6 million. Most of them, the majority of the buildings, are less than 25,000 square meter, or 25,000 square foot, or 2,500 square meter, which means that the majority of the buildings consume on average anywhere between 30 to 100 kilowatts at any given point. This is the average. The buildings. On the left-hand side, this is the reference scenario. So this is what exists now in Europe and in North America. You have two utilities, the electrical grid and the natural gas grid. Okay, it's about 50-50. 50% of the energy comes from the natural grid. Boilers, you warm up the water using boilers, and 50% comes from the electricity. And on the right-hand side, this is the system that we are developing. The idea is to use the current natural gas to do a much more efficient way of generating energy. So we are using software optimized SOFC, which are special solid-oxide fuel cell, working on both natural gas or green hydrogen or any combination. So now the EU is planning to blend 20% of green hydrogen into the current natural gas, and the idea that it will get to 100% green hydrogen or green or renewable natural gas by 2035. We combine it with rechargeable batteries and lots of software. So the idea is to predict the building energy requirements and to adjust using the natural grid and to provide up to 100% of the building with the natural gas network. So this is a typical pattern of energy consumption of buildings. You can see there are very low power consumption at night, peak at mid-noon time. So the idea we can generate the yellow line, it's what we generate with the SOFC. We combine it with batteries. So at any given point, we can provide the energy of the building. So, for example, in the peak time, we
30-second warning.
From the SOFC plus the rechargeable batteries. As for CO2 emissions, from day one, using natural gas, we can do it with 240 grams per 1 kilowatt hour. The EU has labeled anything below 270 as green up to 2035. This is the new rule made by the EU. And the more green hydrogen blended into the network, it will reduce up to zero.
And your time is up. Now I'm bringing the other investors in. Can you share what you're raising and what the status of the company is currently?
Yeah, so currently we have raised from the Israeli Ministry of Energy and private investors about $500,000, and now we are raising an additional $2 million, and the Israeli innovation will complement it by additional $1 million, so it will be $3 million, but one will be from the Israeli innovation. So $2 million of current fundraising.
Is that dilutive or non-dilutive from the Israeli innovation?
The $1 million is non-dilutive.
Mm-hmm. That's always very helpful. Israel does a great job with funding for companies. We just did an Israeli battery tech company, and you guys just have so much in terms of grants and funding.
Yep, correct.
Mm-hmm. So one quick kickoff question. With everything that's happening in the world these days, how do you see that affecting Fonto power? So natural gas, the pipeline getting blown up, prices skyrocketing. What does that do for you guys in terms of your attractiveness for buildings and real estate?
So, I mean, so I did an ROI calculation based on the new UK gas and electricity price gap, okay, which is 39p for electricity and 10.3 p's for gas for 1 kilowatt. So the higher the prices, the better we off, because this is what it's called the spark spread, which is since we generate the electricity locally. I mean, a gas turbine would do probably 45% electricity efficiency, and once it gets to your house or to your office, you lose about 10% on transmission and distribution. So it's about 35% efficiency. We do it at 85% efficiency, so it's 2.5 times higher. So the cost per kilowatt is much lower. So the higher the gas prices, the better use of our solution, since you can reduce the gas price, the electrical price dramatically. So the less gas you have to use it carefully. By the way, if you do, I mean, if you just switch to heat pumps, okay, and use our technology, you can reduce the amount of gas by 70%. Sorry, by 70%.
Switching to heat pumps mandatory with the solution you have?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
But I mean, let's assume that you take 1 million BTU and you generate electricity in a centralized station. So by the time that it gets to you, it's about 40%, 35 to 30% efficiency. And if you do it with our system, it's 85%. So it's more than doubled. So with the same amount of gas, so let's put this in other words, we can use 500,000 BTUs to get the same amount of electricity that you generate today with 1 million BTU.
Mm-hmm.
So this is number one. And number two, the more natural gas will be here for a few decades, okay? And the idea is that it will be replaced by green hydrogen and by all renewable natural gas, or both. So nobody thinks that you can get rid of the molecules for the next 20. I mean, if you look at the EIA, they still predicted that by 2050, US will generate 32% of its electricity.
Did you guys lose Nadi as well?
Yeah, I've got him frozen.
Okay, I've got him frozen as well. I'll give it another couple of seconds. If he stays frozen, we can jump to our next company and then potentially jump back. Okay, this is a perfect time for us to tell you about Forward VC. So we run an early stage climate syndicate. So pre-seed and seed, we invest in companies that are changing the world in a big, big way. Exeon, our most recent investment, takes your car charging and makes it 100 times faster. So Bird can get rid of 65% of their scooters, and batteries last 30 times as long because they're not degrading.
Sorry, can you bear? I mean, there was a disconnecting here at my side. Can you repeat your question?
We totally lost you, Nadi. I didn't get any of your question. But what I wanted to ask, so what's the cost of implementing a system like this? What's the payback period with traditional gas prices, not in a war scenario?
Okay, so I mean, the business model is energy as a service. So the idea that we don't sell the equipment, but we offer a complete solution. We offer the customer a 10-year PPA, power purchase agreement. Okay, and we charge, of course, based on the public electricity prices, and we take the differences. So at any given point, okay, we can generate the electricity at a much lower, since we are double in efficiency, and we do it locally, and we don't have the peak demand and demand charges, or the typical demand, the typical charges that you are charged with your public network. The idea is that we can keep anywhere between 5 to 10 cents profit for every kilowatt that we sell. So, and if a typical building is about 60, our system is 60 kilowatt solution and 250 kilowatt hour of battery. So the idea is that the system will be able to generate at any given point an average of 60 kilowatts. This is typical building, and this is one system. If you have a bigger building, then you have 2 or 3 systems. I mean, as long as you generate energy from natural gas or coal, and this is going to last for at least 20 or 30 years from now, our solution will be cheaper because of the higher efficiency locally.
So with your application, obviously it's providing a grid edge solution to augment the needs of the grid, provide stabilization, provide some incentives. So by using solid oxide fuel cell on this, the software component's got to be pretty adept and sophisticated in order to match kind of peak timing. I presume you're working that this then works with utilities on.
No.
You're not.
There's a difference. No. There's a difference between us and the other. Since we are behind the meter, we have nothing to do with the grid. This is a behind the meter. This is the first behind the meter solution, unlike the competition like Bloom Energy or Fuel Cell, which they're working with utilities. So we thought that it will be. We thought to tackle this issue from the behind the meter perspective. So we don't sell anything to the grid. That's the reason why the system needs to adapt. So this will be the first time that SOFC load variation, because up until now, all the SOFC was working in a constant load. In our case, we are going to vary the load. So the load will be from anywhere between 30% up to 100%. And we do it in a very sophisticated way, the load variation. So the idea is to have behind the meter without grid. Of course, we'll be grid connected, but the idea the grid connected is only if we decide to use the grid, since the electricity is cheaper at any given point. But we don't rely. So our first customer now that we have signed an agreement is a big US real estate developer, which has 20,000 buildings or units, apartment units. And the idea that they will offer to the customers both resiliency services, and of course, they will compete with the public grid network.
So with this, I mean, with this type of, is it pretty standard solid oxide fuel cell technology for the actual mechanism in place? Because a lot of it has a lot of, it needs a fair amount of lead time on, powering up, getting fueled properly in order to supplement the grid needs. And that's always been an ongoing thing on, like, the on-demand power it's certainly slow on an uptake just because of the technology. So is that just a factor? I guess since you're behind the meter, on this, it's just supplementing marginally to what really better serves the customer on energy costs and needs. But is there anything else that you're doing that is augmenting like the uptime of the actual technology for Fonto?
You mean the uptime of the fuel cell?
Correct.
Yes, I mean that's the whole idea. I mean we don't switch off the fuel cell, never. But what we do, the battery. So we complement. I mean we are doing a two-stage load variation. With battery, it's fast. It's a millisecond variation because we have four. I mean on every one of every 1 kilowatt that we generate, we have about 4 to 5 kilowatt hour of battery. So this is the ratio 1 to 4. So at any given point, if now we generate 60 and they're demanded for 200 kilowatt, we still have lots of capacity in the battery. The problem is what happens if there is less capacity. So then we have to predict, and then we have to reduce. It takes about 1 hour to reduce the load of the fuel cell without affecting the performance and degradation of the fuel cell. So that's part of our IP. We do online degradation performance analysis just to make sure that the fuel cells are not affected. But we do it in a very sophisticated way, so the fuel cell is not affected. So it takes about half an hour to 1 hour to change a variation from 100% to 30%. So we do load prediction, which is not that problematic, because building more or less the same building, of course, we learn the way the building pattern, it doesn't change much. And if it changes much, of course, batteries can cope with fast changes. So batteries cope with the fast changes, and the load variation cope with, for example, weekend. In the weekend time, that every Friday you should reduce by 6 p.m. You should reduce the fuel cell to minimal. And if you add, for example, PV on top of it, then you add more uncertainty to your system. So basically, our IP, or what we develop, it's I would call it distributed energy resources operation system. It is very capable with specific SOFC in mind. So it's not gas turbines, it's specific our own SOFC. And we are using off-the-shelf SOFC stacks with our addition. So we add IoT sensors, and we had some other mechanisms, wiring, and new wiring, and so forth, in order to be able to provide the load variation, which doesn't exist today. I mean, none of the SOFC manufacturers are dealing with load variation, so it's constant rate.
Got it.
Natalie, thanks for that. I think my question is all around where you see the target markets for this. Bearing in mind, the real estate space is large, complicated, multifaceted. So where do you see yourself in, say, a year's time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time, in terms of the markets you're serving, size of building, geographies, etc.?
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, my previous company, Smart Green, which was acquired by Panelists Group. So I'm dealing with energy management in commercial building for the past 13 years. So my previous company was installed in about 500 buildings in London, in Walmart in the US, in Israel, and so forth. So this is where I came with the idea. So our go-to-market is to work with real estate developers or facility management companies, okay, which has now, because if you look at a facility manager or building owner, they have a big problem today because they have to provide a lot of electricity to the customers, which they rely on the current grid. And in most cases, if they want to double the electric capacity, and they won't, the answer in 90% of the cases is no. This is number one, especially if you want to add fast charger. And of course, they have to deal with lots of resiliency issues. So in a year time, our roadmap, so within the next 12 months, we're going to install 1 or 2 systems in the US with a specific real estate developer. In 2 years, let's say in about 2 years' time, probably we install 10 to 20 systems. In about 3 years' time, we have an ambition to open our own factory for fuel cell. So we are talking with 2 fuel cell companies to license their technology and to open our own factory in the US and Europe, just because of supply chain issues. I mean, now everybody are looking for SOFC, for electrolyzers. So I mean, and if we want 1,000 buildings would require us, we'll have to generate about 50 megawatts of capacity. In today's full SOFC capacity, maybe it's 1 gig. So if we want to make sure that we have enough supply, we'll have to build our own factory or production line for SOFC stacks and SOFC systems within the next. So to answer your question, within a year or two, within a year, we'll have a working beta site in the US. Within 2 years, we'll have a commercial, the first 10, 20 commercial systems. And in 2026 onward, we think of having like 100, 200, 300 buildings every year. I mean, just to bear in mind, 1,000 buildings is equal to about $50 million of profit, not revenues, based on 5 cents per 1 kilowatt. And this is achievable. I mean, if you look at micro turbine companies like Capstone, they're doing today 1,000 turbines every year. And there are about 200 people companies. So you don't need to be huge to make 1,000, 2,000 buildings per year. And since this is energy as a service, if once you have the 1,000 buildings, the next year you have 2,000 because it's 1,000 plus another 1,000, so forth. So that's the idea. So by 2030, our business model, we'd like to see our systems installed in about 15,000 buildings, which are not, I mean, it sounds much, but as I mentioned, if you saw in the slides, there are 6 million commercial buildings in the US alone. So having 15,000 or 20,000 buildings, it's about 1, 2, 3% of the market.
Okay, thank you. I think there's a bit more for me to just digest there to get my head around it and the complexities therein. So let me just sit with that for a second.
One question I have for you, Nadia, is what is the status of the team and how do you plan to scale this up quickly? You're clearly very technical, but I feel like selling into this market being very technical will make things a little challenging.
Correct. So currently, I mean, we are four founders, 2 professors from Tel Aviv University and Bar Ilan University, fuel cell guys, myself, I'm more on the system level, and there's 2 persons on the chemical level and on the mechanical engineering. We have outsourcing the software and so for the next 12 months, we'll keep the team 6 to 8, 10 people maximum. Because we have a very specific task of delivering the first 60 kilowatt unit to the customer, okay, probably the US. And we use, of course, outsourcing companies. So the fuel stacks and the system is built by third parties, 2 or 3 different third parties. So, of course, once we grow the business, we'll have to hire more salespeople. And the business model, of course, I mean, the installation will be done with distributor. So we don't intend to install the system ourselves. So, for example, we already have an access. We just approached, for example, a micro turbine company, a few of them in the US. So we have a list of 400 qualified companies that have installed CHP solutions in commercial buildings. So the idea is to move with these companies and to install the equipment in the property in every region.